In three. Oh,
Joe's got me. I turned off. I've been turning off the automatic button too. It kind of makes sense. I guess I
yeah.
hadn't thought of it.
The autumn. Oh,
Well, when
God,
you're
I haven't done that in
streaming,
such a
you
long time. Yeah.
yeah.
Right. Stream's working.
Righty then.
I got it brought up so I can try and glance over and see chats. Hello, Mark. Hello, Joven and Bodie Linux.
Hold
I hope I didn't mangle your name too much.
No, it's pronounced Bodhi.
No. Joven.
A kid.
Okay, I forgot to start Craig. Let's get Craig going, shall we?
Our recording.
Yeah, I wish I could shut that off. Maybe you can. I just haven't.
It's okay. I like to know.
Oh, yeah. You got an
Yeah.
Amaze Fit?
I bought one. I
Now
don't have it yet.
recording.
Wow, that screwed everything
Yeah, they
up.
just came out with a new design, and
Let me see.
so yeah, it's the Active 2.
Show me.
Oh no, I don't have it yet. This is still
Oh,
my
okay.
Pixel.
Okay.
I get it in a couple days.
That reminds me, you guys that, well, Moss isn't here. You guys have trouble with your Pine Time. Where did you order yours from?
Fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, they shipped it from China. It took like 6 weeks to get.
Well, did you order it from directly from the Pine store, or did you get it from some third party?
Nope. From the Pine
Because
store.
I'm still rocking mine. I don't know. It
Yeah.
must just be extremely
But
hit and miss.
It went beyond the screen messing up for me. It was also the just Gadget Bridge just not really, doing much for me. And honestly, I wanted the sleep tracking and
Yeah.
heart rate monitor and all that kind of stuff, like just more sensors. So, but I haven't been. It's been 4 months with the Galaxy, not the Galaxy, the Pixel Watch 3, and it's I don't know. It's not their best effort, I don't think.
No.
So I'm thinking, based on the reviews I've seen, this Amaze Fit seems to be like a good middle ground where the price is reasonable and you get all the same sort of basic features, and then the battery life. That's one of the most annoying things about this is it's a 36-hour maximum battery life, and that's with battery. What is it? Battery mode,
Optimization or
whatever, low power mode. Yeah. Yeah. So like I charged it, let's say 10 hours ago, and it's already at 60%. So it's just, and I'm not even doing all that much. I don't have like GPS tracking going and the things that would normally drain it. So it's fine. It just has compromises, and I think for what I paid for it, I can get my money back out of it and hopefully be happy with the Amazfit.
I noticed there's two versions of Gadget Bridge, and one of them is considerably more well maintained than the other. Because I switched to that Bangle.js version,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden I started getting phone call notifications, and things just started working better. I don't know how useful it is, but if I'm outside my truck doing something and somebody's calling, I can see what it is. I can answer it from there. I don't know how useful that is, but
Yeah, I get into it in my wanderings, but surprisingly, having the ability to pick up a call on the watch is really useful. It never fails that, my hands are full or like it's just a bad time
Yeah.
for someone to call. And rather than having to like dig my phone out, I can just literally, and I can even tap it with my nose.
The last time I
Yeah,
had
you
a
would
watch
not
have it.
believe
was trying to
how
let me in.
useful that is, being able to.
Yep. To just do this and have it pick up.
The last time I had a watch that I was picking up my phone calls with, I couldn't understand a thing that was coming out of the watch anyhow. So
Oh, see the speaker on this one's pretty clear. And from what people have told me, the microphone's pretty good too. So,
Well, I always have a headset in, so even
Oh,
hitting this, it automatically goes to the headset. So
mhm.
well, this one, it only works with the headset on the one that has LTE or something. It's weird. You can't take calls through the headset on the Bluetooth one. I know it doesn't make any sense, but
it's not like my headset's connected to my watch. I mean, it's connected to my phone.
oh, you're saying for your phone. I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. Okay.
Could use a little gain
just
on
got
your side, Joe.
Considerably quiet, Joe. Yeah, you were
Oh,
fine, and then all of a sudden you got quiet.
Well, I saw that I was like kicking off, or it was kicking on when I wasn't talking, so I turned it down a little bit. So finding that
Okay.
happy medium. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
How's my
That's
level?
better.
Let's hear you, Moss.
Here I am. Yeah, it's me.
On the level.
Yeah, close enough. It's
Not a
bouncing.
Mason.
When he's talking normal, it bounces around 15, but then when he leans up into it, it's well above 10.
When I lean up into it,
Yeah.
Hey there, everybody.
Ooh,
hey baby.
Delilah after dark.
How you doing today?
All
I
right.
try not to listen to Diluted any more than I can help.
Diluted. Oh, gosh. All right. Let's
He's
do.
getting old too.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, no kidding.
Let's do the 3, 2, 1 in 20 seconds just because.
Well, okay then. I'm not at the top of my script here. Let me get there.
Because of the wonderful
Okay. So we're
Quick
doing
question before we do that. Eric, have you watched Malice in Wonderland?
I've seen part of it. I have not seen the whole thing, but yes, I've seen some of it.
You should watch the whole thing.
It's probably on Morden C's server, so I'll check and see. He has all that stuff.
I recommended Malice in Wonderland to him, so I would not be surprised if it was there.
Yeah.
Moss, wasn't there
it
something
wouldn't
you
surprise
wanted me
me.
to get, and I told you to remind me, and then I forgot all about it?
No, not. I think we got everything so far.
Okay. All right.
If anything else comes up, we'll let you know.
Right on.
We seem to be doing about 80% Bill and 20% Joe right now.
Well,
I'm making some changes, but I'll talk about that in a bit.
Okay. I still really do not like Plex. When I go to Plex, like this is the stuff I'm watching, I click on it and it says, "Do you want to delete this show?" It doesn't
yikes.
say play it. It says get rid of it. So I have to literally do a search on Plex to find it and play the episode.
Well,
Sorry.
I am probably going to run Jellyfin and Plex side by side and see how it goes.
Okay.
So you're able to delete stuff on his server from your account?
He shouldn't
Yeah.
have permissions to do that. Shouldn't.
It's a permission.
I'll fix that.
Yeah,
Well, the
Jellyfin
problem is
has
it's not
that,
letting
too.
me just go into my stuff and play it.
It's just giving you the
My
delete
only option is to remove it from my list.
Oh, okay. From your
That's just a watch list, though. That's
Yeah,
not deleting
yeah.
it
Yeah.
from the server.
Yeah. All right. Well, how many 3, 2, 1s we want? Because we're not doing
Just
it
one.
just the
recording.
first one, so that I've got a 20-second thing to help me find the beginning, basically.
Before I
And-
send us off track again, let's get started.
Yeah.
So are we doing 3, 2, 1, 0 or 3, 2, 1 record?
3, 2, 1, record.
Okay. 3, 2, 1 record. Did we decide who's hosting?
Wait, are we recording on our side?
No.
Oh, you threw me off with that. Sorry, bro.
Yeah, well, that's why I asked. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I just need 20 seconds of dead
All right, we'll
line.
stop.
And I don't think we gave him 20 seconds. So
We
let's
gave
try
him
it again.
3, so shh.
3, 2, 1, record.
Good enough.
That's about 20 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah. It is definitely Moss if you feel as though you are able. If not, then probably Eric.
It is who what?
Hosting.
Hosting that is.
I just got back. You don't want me to host.
That's fine. I'll host.
Okay, Eric.
I can do it. By the way, I looked at Malice in Wonderland. There's like 4 different versions, so I'm gonna have to ask you which one's the right one.
We'll clear that up later.
Okay. All right. Me.
You.
Welcome to mintCast, the podcast by the Linux Mint community for all users of Linux. This is episode 455. This is episode 455.5. Recorded on Sunday, February 16th, 2025.
Lots of talking. I'm Joe.
Kicking and screaming, I'm Moss.
Evening, partner. I'm Bill.
And hoping to be amaze fitted, I'm Eric. First up in the news, Mint Monthly News, January. Ubuntu 24.04.2 delayed. Asahi Linux lead developer Hector Martin steps down as upstream Apple Silicon maintainer. Serpent OS rebrands as Aaron OS. OBS Studio threatens Fedora with legal action. Then in our wonderings, Bill has been busy with work. Joe's been spending some quality time with Proxmox and Portainer. Moss tries to get up to speed with a long overdue update. And Eric has, I said it in the third person. That's weird. Okay. And
We always
have been having a great time. I know, right?
And I think about it too after the fact.
But I have been having a great time with smartwatches and AI LLMs. In our innards section, Joe discusses his Proxmox setup. In our newest feature, Bodhi Corner, Moss discusses what the Bodhi team is working on for current and future releases of Bodhi Linux. And finally, and check this out, I cover a nice GUI tool named Pods, which is used to manage Podman containers. Please remember, if you'd like to follow along with our discussions, the full show notes for this episode are linked in the show's description at mintcast.org. First up in the news, we have Bill.
Oh, by the way, it's mintcast.org/show notes. We have to get that fixed. Anyway, Mint Monthly News, January 2025, and this is from the Mint blog via Londoner. The only news from the Mint team this month is that in January, donations reached an all-time monthly record of $31,720 from 852 people. Yeah, way to go. This is in addition to the regular sponsors who contribute a sum of $3,909 from 1,467 patrons, making a grand total of over $35,000. That is outstanding, in my opinion. But
yeah,
I could live on
love
that.
Seeing that.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, and you figure if they've got, let's say they've got 10 developers. I mean, I have no idea, but I would assume their user base that seems reasonable. It's just always nice to see that people value it enough, and over 800 people, 852 people, and then $4,000 from almost 1,500 patrons. That's awesome.
Right on. Next, we've got Ubuntu 24.04.2 delayed, and this is from Joey Snedden. I apologize. At OMG Ubuntu via Londoner. Okay, so blog alert. Canonicals. Oh, I hate whoever put my name on this.
Utkarsh Gupta.
Utkarsh.
Yeah.
So the R is silent.
Utkarsh Gupta.
Utkarsh
Yep,
Gupta. I apologize, folks. reports that an unfortunate incident resulted in some newly spun Ubuntu 24.04.2 images for the flavors being built without the new hardware enablement kernel on board, which is Linux 6.11 for those unaware. And while the main Ubuntu ISO didn't include it, flavor images are Ubuntu 2. It's only right that they arrive at the same time. Ubuntu installer images are being rebuilt with the correct kernel on board, but each ISO also needs to undergo retesting, as there was not enough time to do all of that and still meet the original release date of February 13th, so the team decided to delay the release 1 week. The new release date for Ubuntu 24.04.2 is February 20th, 2025, not the longest wait, really. As for the new hardware enablement stack with Linux 6.11 and a newer Mesa that began rolling out to existing users of Ubuntu 24.04 this week, remember, Linux Mint 21.1 will now use these hardware enablement kernels, so expect an update very soon.
22.1.
What did I say?
Yes, you said 21.
21.1. It's okay.
22.1.
We'll forgive you this time, Bill.
I appreciate it. I need all the help I can get. That's. I like that they treat the flavors with just they take them just as seriously as they do the flagship version.
If they're going to make them official, you might as well treat them as official. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, considering, I would think that most of their revenue comes from just the base Ubuntu, not all of it, but I mean, it's not that the flavors don't add some value, but from a corporate standpoint, you would think, well, we can get the main one out, so let's just do it, and then the other ones will catch up. So yeah, it is nice to see that they value them all equally.
Right on.
All right, Moss.
Okay, well, the Asahi Linux lead developer Hector Martin has stepped down as upstream Apple Silicon maintainer. This is from Phoronix, again via Londoner. Following arguments on the Linux kernel mailing list the past few days over some Linux kernel maintainers being against the notion of Rust code in the mainline Linux kernel and trying to avoid it, and very passionate views over the Linux kernel development process, Asahi Linux lead developer Hector Martin has removed himself from being an upstream maintainer of the ARM Apple code. In a patch today removing himself as a maintainer, Hector Martin wrote on the patch, "I no longer have any faith left in the kernel development process or community management approach. Apple/ARM platform development will continue downstream. If I feel like sending some patches upstream in the future myself for whatever subtree, I may or I may not. Anyone who feels like fighting the upstream fight themselves is welcome to do so." So as of now, the Asahi Linux lead developer doesn't plan on directly contributing any longer to the upstream Linux kernel, but seemingly just the Asahi Linux downstream code. Others could take over wrangling the patches in an effort to get them upstreamed. Asahi Linux developer and co-maintainer Sven Peter already commented, "Give me a few days to figure out what we'll do. I think we can keep Tree going forward." But in any event, these upstream Linux kernel mailing list drama, these drama, that's a good sentence. But in any event, these upstream Linux kernel mailing list dramas aren't good for moving the Apple Silicon support forward, especially for those wanting to see Linux on Apple Macs outside of the confines of Asahi Linux. We'll see how this situation evolves. Update February 9th, a new co-maintainer has volunteered to help oversee the Apple Silicon code for the mainline kernel. As a co-maintainer alongside Hector Martin, there was already a longtime Apple Silicon contributor, Sven Peter. Now, in addition to Sven helping to oversee the upstream Apple Silicon patches for the Linux kernel, is Jana Grunow. Jana is an existing Asahi Linux/Apple Silicon contributor and has been working on the downstream Asahi kernel tree since last April, as well as working on a number of drivers. Jana Grunow has the blessing of both Sven Peter and Hector Martin. As of February 11th, a major development has taken place with the Rust kernel policy being put in place to prevent future conflicts. Posted by Miguel Ojeda, leader of the Rust for Linux project, this new policy looks to help set the record straight surrounding Rust integration in Linux. It is backed by a community of developers who come from different backgrounds and organizations, with a couple of notable sponsors, one of which is Google, acting as a driving force. It lays out key topics like how Rust for Linux is not an effort by the Rust project or the Rust Foundation, how many key kernel maintainers do support Rust in the kernel, and how changes are not allowed to be introduced if a C change breaks a Rust-enabled build, with an exception for Rust subsystems. And yet another update. On February 13th, Phoronix reported that Hector Martin, who started the Asahi Linux project, has decided to resign as project leader of Asahi Linux. He commented on his blog that working on the project has become less fun over time and notes user complaints around the lack of Apple M3, M4 support thus far and other missing features with Asahi Linux on Apple Silicon like Thunderbolt and USB monitors. Quote, I'm resigning as lead of the Asahi Linux project effective immediately. The project will continue on without me, and I'm working with the rest of the team to handle transfer of responsibilities and administrative credentials. My personal Patreon will be paused, and those who supported me personally are encouraged to transfer their support to the Asahi Linux Open Collective. GitHub sponsors does not allow me to unilaterally pause payments, but my sponsors will be notified of this change so they can manually cancel their sponsorship. I want to thank the Asahi Linux I want to thank the entire Asahi Linux team, without whom I would have never gotten anywhere alone. You all know who you are. I also give my utmost gratitude to all of my Patreon and GitHub sponsors who made the project a viable reality to begin with. End quote. The Asahi Linux blog has also confirmed Hector's resignation, while the remaining developers plan to keep on pushing Linux on Apple Silicon hardware. They will be focused still on upstreaming to the Linux kernel. The Apple M3 and M4 hardware support isn't expected until more of their code is upstreamed and progress on continuous integration. For Apple M1, M2 hardware this year, they hope to accomplish DP alt mode, sparse images within the Vulkan driver, and internal microphone support. Lots more detail in Hector's blog, and there's a link in the show notes.
Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, this guy's, yes, there's sponsorship, but he's more or less doing it as a passion project, and people are complaining that he hasn't reverse engineered so and so. Yeah, I mean, seriously, I probably would have quit too if it got bad. I mean,
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah, a lot of entitlement in those types of requests. Like I've personally think it's incredible that he was able to do as much as he did. Right? I mean, and not just him. There's obviously a team of people, but yeah, I mean, the fact that people that I know that have these Macs, these M series chips that can actually use it with Linux, which is mind blowing, especially since Apple has made zero attempts to make it easier.
Apple's not exactly releasing their code here, so these people are having to go in there and make it. And
imagine
that's not going to
reverse
be a
engineering
process.
Reverse engineering a driver. You're talking like machine code. Like that's wild.
And it would be different if the M series was actually not something completely standalone made by Apple. If there were other examples of it elsewhere, then that it wouldn't be probably as difficult as it is. But this is all new. So
and they even got an NVIDIA driver out before anyone else in Linux had a complete NVIDIA driver.
I think what we see here is kind of a continuation with a problem that a lot of projects are suffering from these days, and that's not a technology problem, but a people problem, where you have these seemingly insurmountable clashes of personality and people's ability to rise above each other's egos, I suppose. I'm not sure, but it just seems like that whenever we run into roadblocks like this, it's always a human thing rather than a technologically based issue.
The worst part of any job is always the customer. So
yeah, and I remember hearing on another show that and I can't remember if it was quoted here, but Linus's response to a lot of what Hector said was, have you ever taken a moment to imagine that maybe the problem is you? to paraphrase what he said, and it's just saying things like that back and forth. And then, of course, by now, I don't imagine. I mean, I don't know Hector other than what we hear coming through the news about this project and whatever. But, people will put up with no more and no less than what they believe they deserve, I think. And, here's an example of that, really. It wasn't a technology problem. It was a people problem in the end. I hope that he's not making decisions that he's going to regret down the line, because this whole thing has had his name on it since the beginning,
If it's not any fun for him anymore, why would he keep doing it?
No. And it doesn't seem like, I guess it's been going on for a couple of years. It doesn't seem like it, though.
Well, since the M1, M2, so that's what, 4 or 5 years now, isn't it?
Yeah, gosh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's probably close to 4, and creeping up on 5. Yeah.
Crazy.
So, oh my. All right. Well, moving on. So the next story is No More Snakes. Serpent OS rebrands as Aeryn OS, and that's AERYN OS. This is from Linuxiac via Londoner. With a surprise announcement named Evolve This OS, Ike Doherty, leader of the still in development rolling release Linux distro Serpent OS, announced a major rebranding effort, and more specifically, the project adopts the more welcoming name Aeryn OS. He said the decision to abandon the original name was motivated by concerns around the word serpent, the negative and somewhat intimidating associations. A quick clarification: in the Bible, the serpent in the Garden of Eden represents temptation, sin, and Satan. And this is a quote: "In order to move forward, our identity needs to be more befitting of the project we're building, a move into the real world. This isn't a hobby project. It is a full-blown Linux distribution with serious technical underpinnings, achievements, and goals. Getting the tone right from day dot is critical." I'm not sure what that means, but that's how it's written. In explaining the choice of Aeryn OS, Doherty highlights the dual significance of air, derived from Latin, and Aeryn, which nods to the project's Irish roots. The transition timeline is already underway. The official rebranding will be finalized on March 17th, 2025, coinciding, rather fittingly, with St. Patrick's Day. The project has secured relevant domain names such as aaronos.com and aaronos.dev, and is updating social media profiles and public communication channels. Additionally, a new GitHub organization has been established, and the project will migrate its code repositories there in the coming weeks. The author shared a few thoughts. Another quote: "First off, congratulations on the new name. However, there's an old saying, it's not the name that makes the man, it's the man that makes the name. In that spirit, I believe there are still more important things for the project to focus on moving forward. First, after 4.5 years, the project barely made it to alpha just over a month ago. Of course, it all comes down to the time and resources the developers can put in, which clearly aren't great. And let's not forget that Doherty recently announced that he is facing serious financial trouble. The bottom line, this project's challenges are far bigger than just deciding what to call it. Sure, Serpent OS may not sit well with some people because of its demonic associations. Silly, though FreeBSD doesn't seem to have that issue. But at the same time, I'm not convinced that Aeryn OS really conveys any particular message to a Linux user. Forgive me, diehard Game of Thrones fans." End quote. He goes on, quoting again, "Anyway, I hope this change gives the project a much-needed boost and helps it grow faster. The core concept behind it is fantastic, atomic updates, but without the nowadays so modern immutability under the hood. And it would be a great addition to the Linux ecosystem. So, goodbye, Serpent OS. Go Aeryn OS."
So everyone break out your bad Lucky Charms accents and let's go to Aeryn OS.
Well, I reckon it's a bit... It doesn't matter to me either way.
It's magically delicious.
Listen, I apologize profusely to all of anyone who actually has that accent and is, cringing right now.
Moss told me to.
Yes,
Oh, sure. If
I
Moss
learned
told
my
you to
Irish
jump off a
accent
bridge.
off the Lucky Charms commercials, people. It's a very bad Cork accent. I'm aware of that.
It's really interesting to me that when this article first started, and full disclosure, I didn't read it ahead of time, but when you first started, I thought maybe it was a legal issue or something with the name serpent, because you would think that word would be somewhere else, but the fact that it's got some sort of spiritual rooting, if that makes sense,
Well,
is kind of interesting to me.
actually didn't make sense, but I won't get into that.
Yeah, well, I
Yeah,
mean,
and I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I myself remember whenever I heard that it was called Serpent OS, and certainly not because of any demonic connotation or whatever. But
yeah.
I just kind of thought, well, that seems random, right? I mean, what does it have to do with a serpent? Is it, and even if you don't take the, mythological perspective, snakes are generally considered, sneaky and low, and frightening for a lot of people, and it just seemed like an interesting choice. So
I'm
anyway,
more
I think this is
I'm more
Go-
concerned with the idea that Ike Doherty is going under financial problems again, and
yeah.
we haven't heard anything about that. I guess unless you're in the Serpent OS community, you won't get any details on that. But that's basically what sent Solus down a bad track there for a while.
Well, I can't believe 4.5 years. I mean, that's wild. So, well, I think there's some interesting technical aspects to this that are certainly worthwhile, and maybe this
Well,
sort of just pivots everything and goes and gives some momentum, and
it
And they're going to have to make changes on the Solus OS page too, because they make a big thing about being based on Serpent OS technologies. They got to make that fix.
I like the name
Yeah.
though, Aaron OS, and the way it's spelled.
It is neat.
It is
Yeah.
pretty cool. Love it.
Yep.
Ike, come on the show and talk to us about it. We'd love to have you.
Right?
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
or Josh
Love to have
Strobel.
All right,
Becky on the
Joe.
show.
Yeah.
Okay. You got something to say, Moss? Go ahead.
I said or Josh Strobel. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
that
doesn't have to be
or
Ike.
both. Ooh. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, OBS Studio threatens Fedora with legal action. From itsfoss.com via Londoner. Fedora is known for consistently providing a reliable Linux desktop experience while also shipping with the latest packages and offering multiple editions to cater to a wide range of users. The Fedora project also distributes Fedora Flatpaks, which are built from their RPM packages and maintained by them in their repository. Unfortunately, many of these are often unmaintained or broken, leading to a poor experience for users who aren't usually aware they're using them. However, this issue has taken a more serious turn involving the popular OBS project and Fedora's poorly maintained OBS Studio Flatpak. What started initially as a request to either remove or better present the unofficial OBS Studio Flatpak 3 weeks ago has now turned into an ultimatum. OBS lead Joel Bethke has stated that if Fedora doesn't remove all of OBS's branding from the unofficial Flatpak by February 21st, 2025, they will pursue legal action against them. The main issue here is that the unofficial OBS Studio Flatpak is in a very poor condition, causing many users to report issues to the OBS Studio developers, mistakenly thinking they are using the official build. However, there's more to it. In a comment on a video by Brody Robertson, Joel shared that folks from Fedora were not taking the issue seriously, with one of them even resorting to name calling by labeling the OBS Studio devs as being terrible maintainers. Since then, a major step has been taken by Neil Gompa, a well-known Fedora contributor and member of the Fedora Engineering Steering Committee. He has opened a new issue to remove Fedora's OBS Studio Flatpak from the registry as soon as possible. First discovered by Nirui, GNOME software now seems to show an end-of-life message for both the official Flatpak by OBS Studio and the unofficial one provided by Fedora. The writer tested it out on his Fedora 41 installation, and that behavior was pretty apparent. Luckily, this seems to be a temporary issue, as another community member, Chris Williams, chimed in, saying that this was due to the official Flatpak version of OBS Studio using an older, unsupported runtime. In the end, the writer agrees with this move to retire the unofficial OBS Studio Flatpak, and to be honest, Fedora Flatpaks have become something of a hindrance. Doing away with them as a whole also works, in my opinion.
Strange. That is strange to have your. I suppose that in the beginning they might have thought that they had a better runtime, and using theirs would probably add either add performance boosts to OBS or I don't know what. But with something like OBS Studio, it's a strange choice to try to offer your own version of it because
don't forget that with flathub.org, like they had, it hasn't been too long since they've had those official, the marker, the icon that shows that it's the official maintainer. And definitely for a while there were some packaging things that weren't great in OBS. So I think this was just a misunderstanding and timing, really, because Fedora was trying to do the best for their users, and then it probably just got put to the side. And if it wasn't being maintained properly, or in the meantime the OBS team actually started doing a better job packaging it on FlatHub, then okay, but this whole we're gonna sue you, it seems a little touchy. But
and the whole thing of even pulling the official Flatpak, that's kind of over the top.
Yeah. So well, Neil took care of it.
It reminds me of the OBS Snap that somebody got talked into maintaining, and then they no longer work for the company, and then it just got left to languish, and then that piece of software gets judged by how well it works, on the default method of installing on your distribution,
Well, and to be fair, something like OBS, just like Audacity, whenever they package it on FlatHub or as a Flatpak, they can include a lot of the, extras and plugins. And I mean, you're getting a much more capable, the FlatHub version of OBS is very good, in my opinion. It's got,
Well, it's the only way to get it with the browser plugin without compiling it yourself.
Wasn't there something too with FFmpeg for a while where it wasn't, and now, So I think that could have been why maybe as well, for Fedora. So anyway,
did we cover? I've been missing for a while, folks. Did we cover the fact that freedesktop.org has lost their hosting?
Yes. I think we talked about it last time. Or no, maybe we didn't. But I've heard it. I've heard where it's that one company that was offering this bare metal hosting.
And it was
$34,000
a month worth of stuff that they were getting free. And
I apologize.
They're probably going to have to break it up into 3 different.
We should have an article on that because I think that has actually came up in the news since our last episode.
And believe it or not, if you're listening to this and you don't know what that has to do with Flatpak, then you're not paying attention.
Well, I mean, there's
that's
a few
they were building all their packages.
Yeah, there's a few projects that are directly impacted by this, and WireGuard being one of them. And it's not just
it shows
about
you what a small community it is, right?
Yeah. And it's not just web hosting; it's entire infrastructure. So there's going to be some real I don't know.
A lot of compute. Yeah.
I don't know what these people are going to do, and I don't remember what it was just offhand, but it was several tens of thousands of dollars, maybe even millions. That was
it would have been. I think it was
$34,000 a month.
Yeah, I think it was just under $400,000 a year or somewhere around there, something that was astronomical.
Yeah. It's never
free software isn't free, people.
No, I was just gonna say,
it's
never been more important if you're getting value out of something, and it doesn't matter how little amount of money we're talking. It matters that it's recurring. Reach out and throw these folks a bone because these people have to feed their families too. I mean, honestly. So.
Yep. I saw a video today where someone was talking about their Patreon, and they have a significant number of people at the $1 or $2 mark, And they said, if those people were to jump to the $5 mark, it would make all the difference in the world. Like, it would be the difference between scraping bottom and like having an actual income, So what seems like, so that realistically then as an end user, that difference between giving $2 and then $3 more, like $5, is to us, not significant necessarily. I mean, I know it is for some people, but I'm just saying, like, realistically, the extra $3 isn't going to probably hurt many
my
people.
wife says no.
But I think it is so many people are relying on direct donation, and if you can afford to give,
By all means.
if you rely on something and you expect it to be there ongoing, don't just think it's going to magically keep happening without any kind of help. So
we are fortunate to be emissaries for Mint, which is getting sufficient donations, but I'm sure they'd even love more.
Yeah. Oh, well, they would just do more with it, and that's what's great.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
All right.
So are we feeling secure, Eric?
We are. There's absolutely no issues with security and privacy.
Except for political stuff that we don't want to talk about on the show.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about it. Mr. Big Bleep.
I'm getting a musky smell around here.
Yeah. We all got the same one at the same time. I love it. Oh, goodness gracious. So, all right. Well, we're going to go ahead and switch into bi-weekly wonderings. And up first, we have Bill.
Yeah, well, my work has been, to say it's been crazy is an understatement. These last few weeks, after a dry spell, which basically I think was the entire months of November and December, I'm thankful for a little bit of extra work. I've been doing a run that takes me almost to the Mexican border, right outside of Corpus Christi, Texas, to deliver cast aluminum ingots to a steel mill in Sinton, Texas. A trip down there and back basically takes a duration of a week to get done, especially if I have to load and or if I have to pick up something to bring back, which hasn't happened lately, thankfully. I know I said in the past that I was getting off the road and I was not going to be doing this kind of stuff, but after the terrible month leading up to the election, I felt I had little choice. I had to do the only thing I know how to do to bring money in, and it's just a temporary fix for right now for the next month or so. Last week's episode of Three Fat Truckers went off with a bit of panic, at least in the beginning. Okay, so I normally use a Focusrite Scarlett Solo 4th Gen as my primary audio interface during recording. This particular recording was to be with one of my co-hosts, Steve, here in my basement studio recording with me since he was in town for the weekend. Now, I also own a 4th Gen Scarlett 2i2, which allows for 2 XLR microphone inputs at the same time. All should have been well to unplug the Solo in favor of the 2i2, though for some reason this particular time it screwed up the routing tables and mixing tables for both devices, which basically meant no audio was going from the Scarlett to the computer, and I was in full kernel panic. Full support for these devices has been in the mainline kernel for a while now, and the GUI software that has recently been made available, I say recently, it's been a little while now, gives the user access to the ALSA routing controls as well as granular mixing controls that Windows users really don't have, at least not on the same level. And I've never really taken the time to learn how it all worked, at least until now. I was kind of forced into it. About 10 minutes after we finally gave up for the day and Steve left, I figured the whole thing out and was able to get the audio working again. Steve came back over the next morning, and we recorded 2 episodes. I am now a self-proclaimed expert in managing the controls with these GUIs on both devices, and I have to give a big shout out to the dev team of ALSA, the the name of the program is also Scarlet 2 Control Panel, which once I was able to calm down and have a look at their GitHub page, I found they made excellent documentation on each device they support and was able to not only fix the problem but also learn what each setting did. I highly recommend the software to anyone wanting to use Focusrite stuff on Linux. And I still can't tell you for the life of me what went wrong, because I've tried to replicate the problem several times since then, because all I really just did was unplug one and plug the other back in, and each subsequent time it changed nothing, but that particular time it completely. What it is you've got a routing table where you can. It's broken down into your analog inputs, which is your microphones, and your PCM inputs, which is like all of your desktop sounds, and you can route those to the different, like either the mixer or to the hardware outputs. And if there's nothing going to the PCM on the computer, then you're not going to get any sound from the microphones to the computer in order to record with, and that's what was deleted for some reason. And I have no idea why. I just went. I know they were in the Video Ninja room just waiting for me to fix it, because I'm the guy. All of the weight of the world. I'm the guy they look to fix all this stuff, and I was completely unable to see the problem. But once Steve left, I calmed down, looked at the website. Now, yeah, they had nice diagrams showing you exactly how it's supposed to be ran, and then some examples of other ways of doing it.
Isn't it amazing how computers simplify our lives?
Yeah, no. They don't. They haven't simplified mine. But then again, if it wasn't the computer complicating my life, it'd be something else. At least I'm here at home. But yeah, that's been my last 2 weeks. How about you, Joe?
Actually, I have a shorter bi-weekly wanderings this week than I normally have. That's because most of it ended up in the innards. I've been working a lot on Proxmox and Portainer, trying to figure out how it works and how best to fit it into my workflow. Last show, I talked a lot about the 10-inch network rack that I put together. I am loving it still, and I may reprint a lot of it in PETG instead of PLA. But for now, I'm moving on from the building, and I'm working on the electronics and the software. But like I said, the software is going to be basically the entire innards. So we'll talk about that then. First of all, the mini PC that I have hooked up to it is the HP ProDesk G3 600 Mini. I probably should have gone for the G4 just for that bit more expandability, but this one currently has the i5-6500T with 2 cores, 4 threads, and while it came originally with 8 gigabytes of RAM, I was able to get that up to 12 gigabytes right away with the stuff I had sitting around. I have also ordered and now finally received 32 gigabytes, but I haven't put it in yet as I'm waiting for other parts that also arrived yesterday. I ordered an M.2 adapter for NVMe to 5 SATA from AliExpress. Hopefully this one works unlike the AE one that I got before. I also at the same time ordered some right angle SATA cables that go off to the side. Hopefully that all fits in the casing and I'm able to, add a bunch more hard drives directly to the device instead of having them come up over USB, which is somewhat limiting in Proxmox. Although the NGFF adapter that I am using along with USB-C adapter is pretty cool, and I'm sure I will find other uses for it. I'm thinking that I'll probably eventually upgrade to the CPU to the i7-7700T. That with the 32 gigabytes of RAM should be more than enough to cover most of my needs, especially if the parts that I have already ordered are good enough to hook up those more hard drives. It'll take a lot further setup though, and I don't think that I will migrate everything away from my current setup on my garage computer, as there are some limiting factors. I'm also looking to purchase, and I did purchase, some larger hard drives to replace the 12 terabyte hard drive that is going bad. I actually found some 8 terabyte drives for sale on the secondary market with very little use that were too good of a deal to pass up. I ended up getting 40 terabytes of storage for $200. Now, I did have to drive an hour there and an hour back, and I almost died twice in Dallas traffic. Um, but I have them. And now I have to figure out how I want to hook them up, because some of them are going to go in my main computer, and then some of them are going to go on the rack. And I did the smart test on some of my other hard drives that are aging, and like my 4 terabyte is starting to show signs of old age, and I'm sure my 2 terabyte is most of the way there. So a lot of that's going to go, but now I have 40 terabytes. We'll see what happens. Probably 24 will go on the one and 16 will go on the other, but we'll see how it goes. And then I might migrate a lot of the Plex stuff over to the mini PC and see what works. I also got the Lenovo that Moss sent me. Which model is that again, Moss?
That would be an M700 Tiny.
M700 Tiny.
Made in Mexico.
Yeah. Very similar stats to the HP that I have in my server rack. I was able to get it running by replacing the fan with one that I had purchased that the other parts from it fixed Moss's other Lenovo that we had sent back and forth. Now, I could 3D print a bracket and turn this into another node on my rack, but I don't think that that's actually the best use for it. Instead, I have installed Mint on it, and I will be using it to replace the tablet that I'm using as a set-top box in the living room. I'm also going to be attaching a 1 terabyte USB hard drive to it and installing Nextcloud on it, and maybe an instance of WireGuard, just as a backup. So that's what I'm going to be doing probably this next week while I'm on vacation, along with setting up those drives and everything else. But yeah, like I said, pretty short bi-weekly for me because most of it is in the innards. Moss?
Okay, then. I won't even attempt to tell you everything that's happened since I was last here. It's been quite a sabbatical. I've only worked one day at the school district since the new year. The kids enjoyed having me. 2 of the periods were computer systems, but they had no lab, nothing but personal Chromebooks, and the kids couldn't even answer the question of what operating system are you using. So they didn't care to hear me talk more on the subject, so I just let it go. I thought that would have been a perfect place to talk about my podcasting and Linux and all that fun stuff, but it didn't happen. So we're still trying to find a new place to live. No luck. Prices for rent are what they should be in the 2200s, not the 2000s. I'm offering to trade my very well endowed Pine Tab 2 for a Surface 4 or 5 in equally good condition with keyboard. Contact me if you're interested. There's nothing wrong with my Pine Tab 2. I really do enjoy it. It's just so much heavier than you expect a tablet to be. Than I expect a tablet to be.
It's funny how.
Mhm.
Sorry, I
Go
was just
ahead.
going to say, it is funny how I have an older Samsung that's probably close to 6-8 ounces more than the other one I have, and that little bit of extra weight, depending on how you're holding it, it does sort of, feel heavier. Definitely.
The Pine
Like
Tab
there's
is
a fatigue.
definitely made like a tank, and it weighs like one too. But it does work. I can do everything I need to do on it. I could use it as a desktop if I didn't mind the speed, because RK3588 is not as fast as an i7. But anyhow, my brief performance at Gefilk in January went quite well, as did all my other efforts. I have video, but there's pretty bad fan noise. I've had someone just got back to me today that they tried to remove it and it's just all across the spectrum, so it's just not possible. So I'll just have to post it the way it is, I guess. some people were saying, well, you could pull out the audio and work on that in Audacity and then plug it back in, and nobody could tell me how to do that. So I guess I'll just leave it alone. Some of you noticed there was a hiatus in Full Circle Weekly News. Most of that was not my problem, various issues in the supply and distribution chains. But we're back on track and all caught up. I'm nearing my 200th episode, which I think will be episode 403. And I just released episode 400 this morning. I still have my Z800 workstation I'd love to get rid of. It's a monster because of, the biggest problem is shipping cost. It costs close to $100 to ship it anywhere. So if someone wants to come pick it up and give me a couple Benjamins for it, that would be appreciated. It's a perfectly good HP. It's running a dual Xeon. Each Xeon is quad-core single thread. It's just beautiful inside. You cannot beat what HP did on both cable control and fan ducting inside that unit. It is just gorgeous. But it's
I love that.
also a monster machine, and it has a monster power supply, and I do just as well using this little M700 Tiny.
Yeah, I love that form factor. That they are massive, I know, but the internals, I mean, it's just a machine that was built to, like, you know, customize and make it what you need it to be.
Easy to
yeah,
work on.
It's got like
Yeah.
six drive A's. You can set it up as RAID if you want to, or as just a bunch of drives if you want to. And just
Yeah.
wonderful machine, just too expensive for me to run.
The company I used to work for was shutting down a lot of like local branch offices, and they had several. Each branch office had a couple of those type of form factors, and I did end up bringing one home, and that thing had to weigh like 60, 70 pounds. It was quite a machine. So it had dual power supplies, dual, it was like a proper, server.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So that's it for me. How about you, Eric?
Yeah. Well, as always, I go into this thinking, I don't have anything to talk about. And then, half an hour later after I'm done typing everything, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I did. So I did a couple things. One was I spent more time playing around with AI LLMs on my local system. And it was really kind of spurred on by DeepSeek being announced and the fact that it's supposed to be so much better. And so I was just curious to see, if I could get it to run and all that. And they run best on a GPU, obviously, which is why NVIDIA is worth so much right now, although that they did have a little bit of a stutter, but yeah. And I do have in my desktop, I have a half decent GPU, but it's really, it's not really powerful enough in terms of like VRAM is really sort of the biggest thing. Like you just need a ton of memory because it's one of those memory resident type things where it kind of loads the model, at least part of it, into memory so that as it runs, it's running in memory and not, swapping out from disk. So anyway, you can run it from CPU and then it's going to use your system memory, which you can do, and it's just slow. So basically, you just prompt it and then let it do its thing in the background, and it's literally going word by word, just sort of slow, but it does it. But I would rather use GPU. So the one I have now is an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2060, and it has 6 gigs of VRAM, which is about the bare minimum needed for reasonable performance with smaller models. You can kind of max out at like the 12 billion models. The 7 billion run faster, but are less capable, obviously. So it's sort of a balance. And some models, even smaller models and quantized models and all that's like they've found ways to make them more efficient, and they're getting more efficient all the time. Like at first you needed a ton of VRAM, and now it's getting more reasonable. So I'm thinking if I can get a card that has the next step up would be something like an RTX 3060 instead of a 2060, and it would have double the VRAM, so go from 6 to 12. AMD cards could potentially have more VRAM, but I've just read that they're not as well supported. CUDA is a huge thing, and it just seems like NVIDIA is really focused so squarely on, and the developers have sort of settled on NVIDIA as the platform. So, but of course, video cards are never cheap, and a 3060 with 12 gigs of RAM is a good one, is around $300. I mean, you can go a little cheaper, but I don't know. Mostly when I get a video card, that thing will last a decade, if you take care of it. So, I tend to get the better quality ones and spend the extra money. So we'll see if I come into a windfall, or, I'm at the point where I've sort of, when I want something new, I sort of sell something that I already have, which I think is kind of a healthy habit to be in, instead of just continuously collecting more. It's making a decision of value for value. Like, is this thing worth me getting rid of something else? So anyway, so yeah, I've been having fun just playing around with that, and you just learn different tricks of like, how can you squeeze the most performance and get something to run properly. And it's just interesting. And the way I've been doing it is it makes it even easier, because there are applications that just basically do most of the work for you. So there's one called Alpaca, and that's kind of a play on Llama, because Llama is one of the LLMs. GPT for All and LM Studio, and they all have nice features like being able to search for specific models, and it's like going out to Hugging Face, which is sort of where all the models are, and letting you download them directly within the application and then running them. And then they will analyze your system and give you the best option in terms of like how much it can run on the GPU versus the CPU. Ideally, obviously running it mostly in the GPU if it can, but if not, then it will just fail over to the CPU. So yeah, nice. We're kind of gotten to the point where things have matured, and something like GPT for All or LM Studio are just a turnkey solution. And with all the models that are available, all these open source models, it's really impressive what you can do. So, and the other thing that I spent time on is smartwatch. So we were talking a little bit about the Pine Time, and that's where I started. It was last year, sort of like mid-year, I bought a Pine Time, just more or less to prove the point of whether or not a smartwatch would be something that's valuable to me, and actually,
It was my fault, I admit it.
No, it's funny, because Pine is one of those companies that has, these bespoke sort of self-built systems, and I've, the Pine tabs and the Pine phones, and like, I still would like to get a Pine phone at some point just to play around with it. I know it's not going to be a replacement for a full-on, Android phone, but still just something to play around with, basically. And so anyway, so yeah, the Pine Time was sort of that first foray into what's possible with a smartwatch. And mainly for me, the use case was getting notifications on my wrist, because I tend to miss them when my phone's in my pocket. I don't feel it vibrating, or I can't hear it, or whatever. And my wife was starting to get annoyed with me, because she would try calling me and I wouldn't answer her, and she'd get worried about me or whatever. So that was one of the use cases. And then the other, just, heart rate tracking, basic sort of biometric type stuff. And just to, some of the health sites, it's nice to count your steps, and having it on your wrist is really convenient. And one of the things that I ended up finding out once I got rid of the Pine Time, because, to long story short, it started to fail a little over 5 weeks or so, where the screen, the top of the screen was failing. So it was sort of like garbled, and you couldn't quite read it. And then, excuse me. And then also, I was having problems with Gadget Bridge, which is, so Pine doesn't do a lot in terms of the software end of things. So they're developing the hardware, and then they hope to have they hope to have independent developers either assisting or just developing things outright. So like the Pine Tab was a good example of that. It was and the Pine Phone essentially, like they were reference builds. They were hardware that was available that was open so that the developers could build things around it. Like we talked about Asahi earlier, and that's where it's closed, and they've had to like reverse engineer versus something like Pine, where they're giving you the hardware and the spec and everything, and then you just build for it. But the downside of that is that something like Gadget Bridge only kind of works in terms of like the feature set and being able to do all the things that I'd hoped to be able to do. So that experience wasn't great for me, at least. It was functional, but yeah, I just started having problems with it, and then the hardware was failing. So I did some research and came up with I wanted to try the Pixel Watch. I have a Pixel phone. I kind of thought, well, maybe they'll have some what is that? What's the word I'm thinking of? Where Apple's products all work together. I can't think of it right now. Synergy, but there's what's that?
Convergence.
Convergence. Thank you, sir. That's the one I was thinking of. Yes. So I was hoping there'd be some convergence there, and really, there isn't not a lot. Like for being a Pixel branded product, the Pixel 7 phone and the Pixel 3 watch don't really. I mean, I don't think it would work any differently on any other Android phone. Like it would just do the same thing. So
honestly, that's a good thing. I mean, they're not
no, it is.
They're not limiting the device based on another device that you own the way some other companies do. So
well, like Galaxy Watch, and that's one of the reasons I didn't get a Galaxy was because there were some things that only worked if you had a Samsung phone. And I don't. So, that was one of the, if I had a Samsung phone, maybe I would try that, because I actually did go look at them at Best Buy, and I thought the Galaxy Watch was a nice looking piece of hardware. But yeah, that's what sort of shied me away from getting it, because it did seem like having a Samsung phone would have made it a better experience. So anyway, so yeah, I've had the Pixel Watch for 4 months. The biggest thing for me, I think, is that Google bought Fitbit. And Fitbit still sells their own branded watches, their own hardware. They more or less, to me, it feels like they just sort of shoehorned Fitbit onto this watch. Like it doesn't have any sort of like meaningful integration, in my opinion. It's just like the Fitbit software running on this watch. And it's not like it's, a Pixel thing. It's just basically, hey, let's just take the Fitbit stuff and shove it on here. So that combined with the battery life being, maybe 36 hours, and that's with battery saver on all the time. I just, it's, and also the proprietary band connection, which is kind of dumb because, you can't just use any watch band. You have to get the Pixel watch bands. And they either are way too expensive, in my opinion, but those ones will then fit properly, or I got some sort of cheapy ones and they fit, but they sort of wiggle and make noise. So they're a little janky. Anyway, it's just not been what I would consider like this thing was like, when it first came out, was like over $400. It's just like, it's a lot of money for something that I feel isn't really all that, I don't know. I don't think it's worth that, in my opinion. So my decision was when I was researching the Galaxy Watch, the Pixel Watch, I realized that there were these sort of mid-tier brands of watches, and I'm saying mid-tier in terms of price. They all have sort of the same equivalent features. They've got fitness tracking and integration, and weather and maps and navigation, all that sort of stuff. So they all have a sort of equivalent feature set. The difference being that they don't use Wear OS. So this and the Galaxy Watch and the OnePlus Watch, and sort of there's that higher tier of watches on Android that are using Google's Wear OS. And then this watch, this Amazfit is the brand. Another one is CMF, which Majid just got a CMF watch over Christmas. So the nice thing is you get all the same features, but because it's not Wear OS, the battery lasts for a lot longer. So this one was maybe 36 hours versus the one that's coming from Amazfit is 10 days. And even more if you sort of, eke it out, you can turn on battery saver, and I think you can get a full 2 weeks out of it. So, I'm looking forward to trying it. It's it looks like a very nice, like sleek watch, nice size, 44 millimeter, so not too big, not too small. 2000 nit brightness screen, so it should be great outside. No problems with that. And they have an app that's called Zepp, Zepp, and it's the one that's kind of like the Gadget Bridge, but their bespoke one that does all of that integration between the phone and the watch. And it also has the speakerphone. Excuse me. So that'll be nice. And yeah, I'm looking forward to giving it a try and see how it is. So, but that's all I've got. So why don't we move on to the innards? All right. So for innards this week, we are going to talk about Joe's experience with Proxmox. And Joe, do you want me to read some of this, or do you want to take it and just sort of read it all?
I'll take it.
Okay,
I
go
want
for
to
it.
preface this with saying that I am not an expert in Proxmox. I am a petty dabbler at best. So if there's anything that anyone would like a little bit more focus on, send us an email, and we'll have another innards where I go over whatever it is that you decide that I should be looking into. Maybe. Now, Proxmox is an operating system that's designed to be a virtualization platform. It allows for the deployment of virtual machines and containers, lots of web-based interfaces and management, and it does sit on top of a stripped-down version of Debian. Proxmox, I found it really easy to set up and get running, but a bit harder to understand as a whole. I got everything working at a high level very easily. Getting it installed and setting up my first LXC and my first Mint VM, not too difficult to understand how to allocate the hardware, and that overlap is not an issue until things get really too expansive. So I can pass one core, 2 threads to 3 or 4 different VMs and containers, and even though I only have, 4 threads total, it's not going to be an issue, but everything will get used depending on availability. And you can monitor all that from the data center to see how things are being used. And I did use Proxmox VE helper scripts to set up the LXC that I used, which was Portainer. So Mint was up and running in no time, and every VM you set up has an instance of no VNC attached to it, which allows you to view the OS or the console from a web page. Now, when you're setting up the VM, you do have the chance to allocate the storage and the VRAM and set the size of the page file as well as the IP address of the VM. And that's internal to your network. So one of the easy things that you can do is it starts the naming at 100 for the different containers that you set up. So you can use those numbers as the last 3 digits in the IP, and that will lock those into that, and then they're easy to find on your local network. Now, this one I've been using for this VM of Mint, I've been using for quite a while now, a couple of weeks, along with Dex, to have a full version of Linux available on my phone at any given time. I'm absolutely loving it. Now, it's not the Linux machine in my pocket the way that I always wanted it to be, but if the network connection is good, it may as well be. All you need to do is request the desktop page on your phone, and you're off to the races. And yeah, like I said, I'm loving it on my external monitor that I have, being able to set it up that way. Now, where I started having problems was passing things to the LXC container that I made, the one that is running Docker and Portainer, such as using a Samba share the correct way. Now, I followed all the instructions that I could find over and over again, setting it up on the top level and trying to pass it down through the built-in systems to the VMs and the LXCs. the VM not so difficult to set up, but the LXCs, the permissions would never get right. Privileged containers or unprivileged containers, which it's recommended to use the unprivileged containers for security purposes. Honestly, the LXCs are just less secure in general, but my network is pretty locked down, so I'm not worried about it. But the best I could get from those shares was read access, and that wasn't going to work for everything that I wanted to set up. Um, in the end, it was actually easier to forego the passing of the share and create the access at the container level or from within the VM itself. There are some restrictions, like none of them use an actual FS tab, but that can be gotten around with some bash and some cron tab. That's one of the great things about the command line that I absolutely love. Nearly everything that can be done can be automated. So as long as I know how to set up a mount, then I can automate that and set it to at reboot, and it will come up every time, as long as the Samba share is available, of course. Now, I spent 2 weeks trying to do it the hard way before deciding to hit it with the proverbial hammer. And now I have a lot more things to set up. With the direct access, I'll be changing the Samba to make it a bit more limiting depending on the information that is needed for each tool. Basically mounting the different drives on the Samba to different containers in Portainer. So I still have the Portainer setup that I had before, but with the Samba share connected, I can now use the slicers and LibreOffice and save things to my PC or save things to a location that other containers can access. Moving on from that, I'll probably come back to it in a few minutes, but I spent some time trying to get another VM set up for Batacera on the Proxmox server, but to no avail. I even went as far as to get it running on VirtualBox on my garage computer and attempting to migrate the VM over, but it would never load, or at least it would never show anything on the screen, but there was some CPU usage that I could see from the dashboard. So in the end, while looking for a solution to that, because I wanted to play games from the Proxmox server, I was actually able to find a Docker project that worked really well called Emulator.js. It fit right into Portainer with no problems, and I was able to start playing Super Mario 1 right away. I have a lot more classic games to test before I can give a proper review of it, but for ease of setting up and portability, it seems pretty good to me, and I should be able to use a controller on it with no problem. I was also able to either load files from the web page or to have it look through my Samba share, which means my whole collection should fit on there easy enough. I am planning on eventually setting up Home Assistant and seeing how I can make that work with what I already have set up for Alexa, and if I can get a bit more automated without having to set things up from my phone. But I will also need to learn a lot more about Home Assistant in order to use it, so it is on my list of things to do. But I don't know how high up on the priorities it really is. Now that I have the Samba storage situation a lot closer to sorted, I'm going to have a look at migrating a couple of my other VMs and setups over to this machine and free up some space on my garage computer. Now, since my Pi Force fan is going out, I also decided to look into a container for Octoprint, which I was able to find and install onto the Portainer instance. But it ran extremely slowly. I mean, insane. It took like 10 minutes before I was able to access the web interface. Even though it wasn't using very much RAM or processor, and you're able to monitor that in Proxmox from either the data center or the actual node where everything is set up. So it's extremely useful to see how much is being used on the summary page to know what's causing the issues. Like, I know I'm going to need to upgrade that 12 gig of RAM, and that should fix most of my issues. But like I said, it was running very, very slowly. Now, I did get it running there. It did run, but there were errors. It was unable to get the USB that I passed to it. So it was unable to see my 3D printer. It was unable to see my camera. and it said it couldn't access the internet for whatever reason. So no matter how I passed the USB to that system or adjusted the privileges on the device, it was an issue. So what I did was I installed it on my garage computer to see how it worked there on Portainer, and everything ran fine. I did not have any issues. It was able to access the USB as long as it was there. It could see the camera, it could see the printer, and everything was fine. So what I ended up doing was installing Docker and Portainer onto the Mint VM. And that worked without a hitch, really, freeing up my Pi 4 for other projects. And once I get a new fan in it, of course, and making my garage a lot quieter. But the passing of the USB to the VM works, but you have to be careful in the way that you do it, because if you disconnect and reconnect or restart the system, it could be allocated to a different point, which is why it's better to do it from the identifier of the device itself, and then it will remap it to it every time. I found that out the hard way. So my current setup, I have Cura, Emulator.js, FreeCAD, which I still need to learn, IT tools, which if you get a chance to check out, you should give it a try. Great collection of simple tools that you can use online. LibreOffice, which self-explanatory, Orcaslicer, Pi-hole, and also now on the VM, I have Octoprint. And it does seem to work well. I will have to do a test print like I did this last night. So I will come back and let you know in a couple of weeks how that's going. Now, all set up and use, but the other ones I mentioned are all set up and in use on the Portainer LXC, and I'm sure that I will add more in the future. I tried to set up the Docker version of Nextcloud using Docker Compose. I think I've done a Nextcloud setup with Docker before and didn't have any issues, but this time it just wouldn't work. So in the VM itself, I installed a different version. I think it was the Flatpak version of Nextcloud, Nextcloud Desktop, and got that up and running and copying everything over. Now, I may end up using the VM instance of Portainer for several things. Since I got the 40 terabyte of hard drives all ready to be hooked up, and when I had Jellyfin on there, it looked to work pretty well, and it is much easier to pass drives to the VM than it is to the containers. So maybe I'll set it up there, or maybe I will migrate my other VM there and then set it up in that one, but we'll see how that goes. Now, I like I said, I just could not wrap my head around getting the Docker version of Nextcloud to work, and I did try that from just the VM, but not the standalone LXC Portainer version, and yeah, it wouldn't have worked unless I could have passed a lot more things to it anyway. So now, from the Proxmox top level, it is much quicker to format like a USB hard drive. It takes the standard few seconds, whatever. But I noticed a permissions issue on one of my drives that was passed through to the VM. I set that to format, and it said it was going to take 9 hours to format. So now I'm wondering if it's a drive issue or if there is an issue with doing it from the VM and having it pass through 2 layers to get there. Now, like I said, from the top level, it only took a few seconds, but there shouldn't have been any read-write permissions errors, especially since the other drives that I had passed through the exact same way didn't have those same issues. Now, my next software-related project on this is to, like I was saying, move my other VMs that are currently on my garage computer onto this device and see how well it runs. I've also given some serious consideration to turning that stand, the whole network mini rack that I have, into my garage PC and then moving my garage PC into the house so that it has a much quicker connection, and then putting Proxmox on there and having that run everything. I think that would be a very interesting setup and provide me a lot more resources, since that already has 32 gig of RAM. It has a graphics card hooked up to it that I could use for transcoding and everything else. And there are ways that within Proxmox, if you can because you can do PCI allocation to different devices, where you could have a specific VM that has the graphics card passed to it, and then that will output to the screen. But then nothing else can use the resources within that graphics card. So that would have to be the one that's not only outputting to the screen, but also the one that has anything that requires things like transcoding, which can also impact your various slicers, which need a graphics card in order to properly perform that slicing. So Cura may be an issue, but some of the other ones might not be. I don't know. Is there anything specific that you guys want me to go into further detail on? Because that's pretty much what I have in the show notes right now.
Not really. I was thinking when you was describing the challenge with once you pass through a hardware, a piece of hardware like your video card, then other parts of the system wouldn't have access to it. And I was wondering if there was a way to create like a master container and pass the hardware through to that, and then have child containers off of that one that are basically inheriting.
It's basically what it does from a top level. So as long as you're not specifically allocating that PCI device to something, it should be able to share the resources amongst everything. I was just talking about a specific instance to be able to pass your video. So, because like Proxmox itself, when it loads up, if you have after the initial install, if you have an HDMI hooked up to it and it's hooked up to a screen, all it's going to show is a command line essentially, and welcome to Proxmox, and you're accessing everything over a web page. But if you pass that PCI of the graphics card to a VM, then that VM is going to be what's outputting over that HDMI connection. So everything else would still be accessible from the web interface, but you could have like a set-top box setup that has some kind of allocation of all of the other stuff, the RAM, the CPU, whatever, and the rest of it is still running around it.
And that web interface is just connecting to a whatever the IP address is of the
right, and multiple IP addresses. So there's like port, I think it's 8006 is the original one. I don't know. I move things around. But it gives it that initial IP address, and then everything that you create, all the LXCs, all the VMs, they get their own IP address. And then you can access those directly by going to their IP address and their port number. So like with the Portainer one, everything is on one IP address, and I just go to different ports to access different things. And that's one of the things when you're setting up the Docker containers, you have to make sure that you're not crossing over anything else or trying to allocate the same port to the same thing. So you do have to keep an eye on your port mappings for that. But each separate like container that you make and separate VM that you make will get its own port, and you're able to access that from a web page.
It's cool to have that. I mean, I run a lot of containers, and I'm just using a I say bare bones, but I'm just using Ubuntu server to run all that. And when everything's running fine, that's okay. But to be able to have a nice interface and to have management over like what you're describing with all the port numbers and Oh, and then this concept you have where every container has its own IP address. That normally, well, certain types of containers, that's usually just used so that containers can communicate with the other containers that are within the container network. But then there's also ways of bridging those IP addresses outside of the whole Portainer or Docker system. That way these containers can be accessed directly to and from the internet. And it's nice to have some sort of way to manage all that on a web console like that, because it can get a bit unwieldy.
Oh yeah,
because it's a lot
from
of
the
numbers.
command line, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I
went and
recommend
looked.
for you, Bill.
Go ahead.
I recommend setting up Portainer. I mean, you don't have to do anything else other than set up the Portainer and then access the website for it. It will tell you about all of the stuff that you currently have running on Docker. I'm not saying do Proxmox or anything yet, but definitely try out Portainer as soon as you can and just see how it shows you everything.
Yeah.
Okay, Eric?
Go ahead, Eric.
Oh, I was just going to say, when I was looking up, since I figured out we were doing Proxmox this week, I looked, and Linus Tech Tips did a video on how they set up a virtual machine environment for their desktops, actually running, I think it was Windows, but the idea that they were using the high availability and clustering features, where basically it just meant that if for some reason the server that was housing, let's say the containers that were running, and people were connected to it, like it would fail over and essentially almost be transparent to the user. Like, it was super impressive the way that they set it up. And like, I was just looking, high availability is one of the things that the Proxmox VE offers, and clustering. And I mean, it just looks like there's so much depth to this thing, in terms of like what your use case is and what you can do from it. Obviously orchestration and, setting up the the containers and the virtual machines and all that stuff, but then just to be able to have that failover availability, like that's pretty cool stuff.
Is it
Yeah,
true also that they've had CFS support in their kernel since before Ubuntu has? So that's another thing that really makes it easy to, because it's not hard to imagine people wanting
CEPH, right? Or CIFS, CIFS, because they're both of those are on here.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure which one you mean.
I just
I saw
to be able to create pools just right off with maybe just you might have to install the user space tools and that, but you don't have to create the kernel module and all that stuff. It's right there in the kernel.
They called it out in the documentation where it's, if you're using ZFS, just make sure you have 1 gigabyte of RAM per terabyte of drive space.
Yeah, it's kind of an old trope. I'm not sure how important it really is, but it
well, I'm just saying, like, that tells you that, like, they are obviously putting that front and center.
Right on. So that, I mean, people that are doing stuff like this, they want that sort of support for CFS, I think.
Well, the idea of snapshotting, like I was playing around with CachyOS, which is an Arch-based, and they have a Btrfs manager tool built in, and it's something, I don't think they built it, they probably just included it, but it lets you set up the Btrfs snapshots and then lets you browse them and recover them if you need to. But basically, it was a way to see like the volumes you have set up, the space they're using. Like it was a nice graphical way to sort of conceptualize the way that, your Btrfs setup is, the volumes and everything, and then be able to back things up. And then the importance of the difference between a block level snapshot versus a file backup. And like, everything I've always done was just file backup, which is slow and clunky and, it's just prone to, duplication. Like there's just so many issues with that. And then you look at a block level, like a ZFS or a Butterfest, and you just think, man, that's so slick to be able to just take those quick snapshots, and like they take up almost no space, and almost no overhead, and to be able to roll back so quickly. And yeah, and actually it makes sense, because if we ended up branching off, and sorry to get off on a tangent, but we were talking about running Arch, and the potential of it breaking if you did something dumb. But then if you had a snapshot, to be able to just literally, if you're using Snapper,
Roll
just go
back
right
to
back to it.
when
Yeah.
before you made
Yeah.
that mistake. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's a good feature to have.
But
And
I digress.
yeah. Well, no, I mean
Uh,
I think it's important when you're dealing with these containerized solutions to be able to have a good snapshotting plan, a good backup strategy. One thing I see Proxmox offers is a backup server solution, which is
Clustering in nodes, or
yeah.
clustering of the nodes as well. So like if I wanted to set it up on 2 computers, I should be able to cluster them. I'm not sure what all benefit that provides, or if they're sharing resources that way, but it's going to be interesting to find out.
Yeah.
your this little tool, the IT tools page, is really cool, by the way. I was just looking at that.
It also has a section where you can convert like regular command line Docker commands to Docker Compose
Oh, neat.
just really easily. Yeah. So, and it also has cron tab timing. So it'll show you the command, or well, the
Mm.
instead of the 5 stars or whatever it is, it'll show you all the different. When you put it in, it will tell you in plain English what that breaks down to.
Hmm.
So you can test it out before you put it into production. And
Yeah,
just
this
interesting
has
things like that. Yeah.
no, it
It,
has. I mean, and then all the way down to like goofy stuff like AI or ASCII art text generator. I mean, it's just got like everything in the kitchen sink on this page. It's pretty wild.
yeah, but you can also use this, use thin clienting with this, which I find interesting. Like, I could make 5 VMs, and then each one of us could have access to one of the VMs, and then just whatever client that we want to. And I don't know. I just find that interesting that we could use it that way if we wanted, and shared access to storage that way. And we could probably do something similar with like LibreOffice and get away from the other things that we're using for the show notes, but I'm not sure how well it would work if we were all typing in it at the same time. So I don't know.
It'd be worth looking into. This is probably something that we could continue on with the more we play with it, because I've only begun to look at it, and I've never even got Portainer up and running. My attitude towards these servers has been that they work, and there's a lot at stake for me, and so I've really been reluctant to put anything on top of it.
Portainer isn't on top. Portainer is just another
Yeah.
Docker container running, and then it just
Okay.
reads all the stuff from there. So it's not, you putting Portainer on there isn't going to have any effect on what you already have running.
So
It's
it
just going to
itself
give you
is
a
another
graphical view.
Docker
Yeah.
container. Just okay.
Yeah.
Basically running an HTTP server to give me an interface to look at the stuff.
Or install new ones, or maintain the ones that are there,
Oh.
or see the logs on why something is failing, which really useful. Okay. But I can see Moss is getting a little twitchy. He wants to get over to the Bodie corner.
The brand new Bodie corner.
It shows. It's that obvious.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
All right, so then we are moving on, and yes, we have a new feature, Bodie Corner. So take it away, Moss.
Okay, well, everyone who's listened to the show for any period of time knows that I'm a huge fan of Bodhi Linux, which is still the best known distro to be using an Enlightenment E17 desktop, or rather a fork thereof, called Moksha. The mintCast team is allowing me to experiment with adding what I would like to have become a regular content regarding Bodhi to the show. Bodhi has a relatively small team with Robert Wiley as the lead dev. The rest of the team features Stefan, Tristram, Hippitaph, Ryanegma, and a few others who are working mostly on translations. Stefan and Robert are working on the drawer module right now. They knew about this interesting module for years, but it was very buggy. It took a bit of digging to find the source code. They fixed many of the bugs and added some new features, but it still needs some love. Drawer module is a special container-like module with 4 plugins to cover launcher, win list, history of launched apps, and folder files list to show up and pop up after clicking the gadget icon. PC Linux OS is using an older buggy version, and there's a link in the show notes to PC LOS Mag showing them using Drawer, so you can see what we're talking about. Besides clearing up the code quite a bit, Robert added a blacklist feature so you can limit what Drawer is actually showing at any time. They have fixed and re-released the Moon module. Both Stefan and Robert worked on it. It's now available for all versions of Bodhi. The module brings up a high-definition image of the current moon phase right on your desktop. It's resizable, it's movable, it's wonderful. I've got it on my desktop. I can probably, I've got a screenshot I can send to the Discord group later. It is, of course, an optional gadget. You have to turn it on, you have to set it up, and as with EFL gadgets, it can be difficult to find where you're doing what to it, but it's fun. We've added Hindi and Marathi translations to Moksha by Pagoda user. Stefan plans to start on a new Moksha theme, which will be bright with rounded corners and floating like effects. If you've tried any of the themes on Bodhi, you know they're a cut above the themes in other distros. When you change a theme in Bodhi, you change the whole desktop. It's incredible. I think others have commented on that. The current debate in moving forward with Bodhi is whether we will continue to release both Ubuntu and Debian versions. The voting is leaning toward Debian, but no decision has yet been made. So I'll do this time, and I won't do this in additional Bodhi corners. The latest versions of Bodhi are Bodhi 7, based on Ubuntu 22.04, available with the LTS kernel, the HWE kernel, and the System 76 kernel, depending on your gaming needs, and the App Pack version, which is a basic version with the most popular apps included. DebOD 7, which is on Debian 12 base, is a very workable beta 3. Bodhi Legacy 7, a 32-bit Debian 12 base, is at beta 2, also quite usable. Work on Bodhi 8 is still in infancy stages, awaiting a decision on continuing with Ubuntu or going strictly to Debian. And Hippitaph has resumed his role as PR director, and I'll be giving regular updates right here in Bodhi Corner.
Excellent. Well, I hope we do carry on with this because I think it's interesting to hear about the inner workings of a project, and hopefully we can get drum up some interest and get some people using a great distro. So, all right, Moss, thank you for that.
Thank you for letting me do it.
Yeah, totally. All right, so next up, vibrations from the ether, but we have none, and the only reason I'm mentioning it is because we do love feedback. We do get some every now and then, and if you're out there listening and you have any thoughts or corrections or anything like that for us, please let us know. And also, things like, if you are using Proxmox or Portainer and you have interesting use cases, or you've done some kind of project and want to, give us an insight into how you've used it, that would be neat. So, yeah, just hit us up. But for this week, we don't have anything, so we're going to move on to check this out. And I stuck this in here. It's something that I found a couple weeks ago. I don't use Podman a ton, but when I do, and Docker's kind of the same way. So Podman is an alternative to Docker, and I'm not going to go into great detail about what the difference between them is, but suffice to say that it's another container system, and it is compatible with Docker in many ways. I don't think it's 100% compatible, but it's very close. Anyway, so along with Docker, it's mainly being managed from the command line and from the terminal. And so you have to really kind of understand how all the pieces fit together, and it can be a bit of a hurdle to sort of get, started, or also just if you have a lot of containers or images and volumes and things like that set up, that just to sort of get a plain view of, 10,000 foot view of like everything that's in on your system related to Podman. This is a great tool. It's built using libadwaita, so it is more geared towards GTK and GNOME desktop, but it will look fine on most desktops. It's very clean and seemingly simple, but then you start drilling down and you realize like there's actually a lot of detail and depth to it. It's presented in a simple way that I think is very intuitive, and was really just very pleased with like how complete it seems to be. It gives you an excellent way to visualize like the containers that are on your system. You can keep track of like disparate pieces of container setups, which can be a bit of a challenge, like I said. So you can connect to local and remote Podman instances, so it doesn't just have to be on your local machine. You can easily overview images, containers, pods, view prepared information about images, containers, and pods, inspect images, containers, and pods, view and search logs, which is really helpful when you're trying to debug things. You can monitor processes of containers and pods, download images, and build them using Docker files, create pods and containers, control the lifecycle of containers, start, stop, and pause, stuff like that in bulk as well. Delete images and containers and pods in bulk as well. You can prune images, rename containers, and there are some Proxmox VE helper scripts, which sort of ties in with what we were just talking about. And it's an amazing little piece of software that is seemingly immensely powerful. I don't do enough with Podman to know just how helpful it could be, but I know that what it has helped me do is to, again, sort of visualize all of the pieces that go into putting together either an installation of software or a project that you might be building, and it is definitely something that if you're working with Podman, you should take a look at. And there'll be a link in the show notes. All right, moving on to housekeeping and announcements. Thank you for listening to this episode of mintCast. If you see something you should please tell us, send us an email at mintcast.org. You can just live on YouTube. You can post mintcast, chat with us on Telegram and Discord. Post directly at mintcast.org. Next episode,
There seems to be an issue there. I think we lost our
Eric,
host.
that whole thing is so from the time you started doing the announcements, it went really wonky. Yeah, Eric, your mic is really messed.
Yeah, we can't hear you. So
let me jump in and read that.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for listening to this episode of mintCast. If you see something you think we should be talking about, tell us. Send us email at mintcast@mintcast.org. Join us live on YouTube. Post at the mintcast subreddit. Chat with us on Telegram and Discord, or post directly at https://mintcast.org. Our next episode will be 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Sunday, March 2nd, 2025. And there's a link in the show notes to get that converted to your time zone. Our next roundtable live stream is 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, February 22nd, 2025. There's a link in the show notes to get that converted to your local time zone. Our next roundtable live stream will be 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, March 8th, 2025. And there's a link in the show notes to get that converted to your local time zone. Live stream information is at mintcast.org/livestream. So wrapping up, where can we get more of Joe?
Well, if you like the sound of my voice, I'm on a couple other podcasts. I'm on the Linux Link Tech Show, which is at tllts.org. I'm on the Linux Lugcast with Eric, and that's at linuxlugcast.com. You can send me an email directly, jb@mintcast.org, or you can buy me a coffee on Ko-fi. Link in the show notes. Moss?
You can hear me every week on Full Circle Weekly News. You can email me, moss@bodielinux.com. And my Mastodon is @Zyvala@hosttalks.social, and I'm occasionally on Hacker Public Radio. Bill?
Well, you can email me. I'm Bill at mintcast.org. I'm at WCHauser3 at fostodon.org on the Mastodon. I'm also, Eric and Majid and I are on Linux OTC as well as Leo. And also Three Fat Truckers. Check out either one of those shows if you get time.
And Majid couldn't be with us this episode, but you can reach him at Dr. Majid at mintcast.org. He's at atypical_doctor at mastodon.social on Mastodon, Atypical Doctor on Instagram and Threads, and at the Atypical Doctor podcast on Spotify and also on Linux OTC. Eric?
You can reach me by email at eric@mintcast.org. How's it keep going?
Eric's mic is still going. You're fine now.
Oh, okay.
So why don't you finish us up?
Because my document is completely garbled. I can't even read it. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, then, before we leave, we want to make sure to acknowledge some of the people who make mintCast possible. Bill for our audio editing and for hosting the server which runs our website maintenance, and the Nextcloud server on which we host our show notes and raw audio. Archive.org for hosting our audio files. Hobstar for our logo. InitRD for the animated Discord logo. Londoner for our time syncs and lots of contributions. We couldn't do this without Londoner. The Linux Mint development team for the fine distro we love to talk about. Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
And Co.
And Co.
And wrap. Thanks, everybody, in the live stream.
It's a wrap.
Under 2 hours.
Yeah, this will be a...
Yeah.
And I did have some people on the Bodie Linux Discord